Welcome everyone to this webinar where we will discuss how to eliminate PII risk by utilizing AI in financial test data management. And we are looking forward to deep dive into various topics dedicated to utilizing AI in the financial sector, specifically for test data management. Before we do that, I think it's interesting to deep dive together into the hidden cost of poor test data. Because of course, the question is, why do you have test data and what are the costs of not having proper test data in place? Because test data is of course the foundation from which you build, develop, test all kind of solutions. So what's the cost of having that of not having a strong test data foundation in place? To do that, we asked it to the groups. So what we did, we posted some questions in LinkedIn with some questions related to test data. So I think the first question that we asked was, has poor test data ever caused delays or financial losses in your projects? And I think, some interesting results. Yes, frequently 44%, sometimes 41%, not sure 4%, not at all 10% with 158 votes. Interesting results. Stefan, what do you think about seeing these results? Did you expect that?
Yeah, that's not uncommon. Within implementation projects, for example, you start with an entire roadmap and plan. You have deadlines set. You have people on the bench to do a certain amount of work. And every delay in test data delivery actually is resulting in the fact that people are not able to do their work. So it's costing a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's totally understandable. Yeah, if you have bad test data and it results in people not being able to test and develop, but managing the test data, that's of course not what you want. Marijn, is that similar to your what you heard from customers?
Yeah, definitely. Well, from customers, but even from experience, I know like when you're developing software and you want to, you want to spot them as early as possible, and you can do that by having proper test data. If you spot them in the end of the cycle, well, worst case at the customer, well, that can be very costly. And I think I read some interesting fact where it can lead to cost 100 times more if you spot them late than early. So that's definitely recognizable. And by having good test data, you can prevent a lot of trouble.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe has any one of you some idea about what kind of financial losses we are talking about? Is it, I heard something about inefficiencies of developers not being able to do their work. Are there other things where we can think about that causes those financial losses?
Yeah, there's a lot. So purely only in delay, but also the result of the fact that test data is delayed will result in the fact that people will build their own test data. And that can result in poor test data management policies, resulting into bugs in production, like Marijn was referring to. And I'll dive into numbers later as well. But in average, within the financial services industry, if there's a data breach because of poor test data management policies before, it actually costs $6 million per incident.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think if you're gonna try to get your test data right yourself, well, it's very tricky. It can be a very long manual process. And even then, it's very hard to account for all those those edge situations, which you of course want to account for as well. And if you want to do that yourself, I would say it's almost, you can go, it's almost infinite work to get that right. That can be very tricky for sure.
Nice. Yeah, thanks Thanks for sharing those insights, and I think that's also a nice bridge towards the second question that we asked. What are the main challenges with test data? Because I can imagine if you face those financial losses, I can imagine many organizations realize that they have to act on that. But yes, maybe it's not that simple. And yeah, that's what we asked. What are the challenges that we faced in getting the test data right? Are those mainly the data privacy concerns, data availability, data quality, or data relevance? I think we see data quality with 43% being on top, though I have to say that it is a bit in the middle. That suggests that all those challenges are present with 397 votes. Yeah, Stefan, is this something that you hear when we meet with customers, or is there typically one reason why people reach out to us?
Yeah, we actually hear all of them. Of course, the basic foundation is privacy concerns. And because of privacy concerns, they start implementing processes which make it really hard to get access to data containing PII, personal identifiable information. So the data availability is not there. Therefore, they're going to modify the data, and they have really lengthy processes with multiple steps. And then you get your data at one point, and in most of the cases, it's actually invalid data. So the data quality, which they actually receive, is not good enough. So they go through the entire process again. So these struggles are practically with all customers and potential customers and everyone in the industry I'm speaking with, they are perceiving the same problems.
Yeah, interesting. And Marijn, what do you think? Is it all problems, or do you see one standing out?
No, I think they're all recognizable, and yeah, but I can imagine from yeah, if you have to work with the data yourself, that you would say like data quality is for me the main pain point. Data privacy, of course, yeah, it's regulation, so you have to fulfill that. But data quality point is definitely something you will definitely notice as you are developing software yourself. And yeah, I already mentioned that can be in terms of like capturing edge cases. But it can also be yeah, other very complex scenarios potentially. Well, it can be simple scenarios, but it can also be complex scenarios, which are often, for example, that you are working with multiple tables, multiple databases. So how are you going to yeah, ensure that the data quality is well consistent over those different systems? And that's yeah, that's definitely a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, I think various challenges can be with data quality, and yeah, we also wanted to deep dive a bit more into that topic. So that's also why we asked a follow-up question, because it was quite interesting. So the follow-up question was, does your test data reflect production data? And here we see the results. Yes, 35%, partially 53%, not at all 13%, with 234 votes. Is that a bit what you were referring to, Marijn, or?
Yeah, yeah, and, you know, and I think this is an interesting one because to be honest, I think the yes is quite high, but I imagine that maybe because production data may be used in some cases as well.
Yeah.
So well, and well, so that's well, I suspect that to be honest. But yeah, so the partially, I think the most people are recognizing that their test data does not fully reflect production data, and indeed, I just gave some examples there, like. It can be edge case, can be integration testing, and that's well, where your data has to fulfill certain rules. And it can be simple things like a social security number. You want to test like that you have a valid social security number. So in the Netherlands, you have it has to fulfill a certain format, for example. Well, that's well, often those things you can miss if you don't have proper test data. Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Stefan?
Yeah, what I would add in here is that a large amount of data they're actually using is production data, as long as it's not PII sensitive. But what is really PII sensitive? That's a tricky one because, well, of course, name, first name, last name, social security number, bank account number, and those types of things are quite obvious. But a lot of data which companies are using is potentially backwards traceable towards individual people, but is not considered production or PII sensitive in that sense. So they feel free to use it. So I think it's quite a struggle sometimes to really judge these numbers correctly.
Yeah, and I think often we, how many times do we receive people in our emails that mention that they use production data as test data? Is that often, or?
That's quite often, even though that nobody likes to say it.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, interesting. Interesting to see indeed, because a lot of people, they need to act on that. That's why they reach out, and one of the reasons they reach out is also that it takes a lot of time to get the test data right. Because using personal data from production is, of course, maybe an easy one, but it's not allowed. And if you want to replace it, minimize the use of PII data in your test environment, you have to find alternatives. If it's hard to align using personal data from production as test data with the privacy regulations, what do you do? It will take time. And that's what we also asked the audience. Will it take less than 25% of my time, between 25 and 50% of the time, 1 to 75% of the time, or more than 75% of the time? With 105 votes. Any thoughts on this from both of you?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot, I would say, but it's a bit it's strange that it's so much on the one hand. On the other hand, it's not so strange because it also tells how important it is to get the test data right. So yeah, you're not spending this time for nothing, and I think that's really a fair point as well, because if you don't get your test data right, it can lead to a lot of costs. It can lead 30% more bugs in production, of which we know if it's in production, it already leads to much more cost than if you have the bugs spotted earlier. So that's that's why it's very understandable that so much time is spent on it. But ideally, of course, you want to reduce that time and with less time achieve better results, so better test data. That's what you would ideally want, I would say.
Yeah. Stefan, any thoughts on this? This time,
maybe to add there is that in a large amount of cases, when you require test data, you are also missing a type of data which you actually need for that specific individual use case. So you have to create it from scratch, which is time consuming, but also how do you make sure that there's no bias in there? So it's quite an intensive process. And separate from that, just worldwide average when people request data, 30% of the times, actually the data sets which they are receiving are invalid for their specific use case. So separate from the waiting times, which they already had before, they have to go through that entire process again. And this is why a large amount of bugs actually exist in production, because all these people are trying to find workarounds to get a certain set available quickly so they can actually do their test, which they are currently working on. Because if you have to wait for 4 months or 6 or more, then you already forgot what you were working on. That also takes time to get back into that whole processing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the final question is, of course, what data do you use as for test data management? Is it production data? Is it synthetic data, or is it a combination of both? 254 votes. Any thoughts on this? Is this what we see in reality as well, or is this a bit skewed?
I think this makes sense on base what I have seen indeed, and of course, there may be cases where you can use production real data if it's really not sensitive data. Well, very often that's not the case, but so a combination of both, we see that a lot.
Yeah, I would agree there. It's most often a combination of both. even though that large amount of mocking techniques or masking techniques which they are using is just nullifying what companies are doing, and that really breaks some tests as well. But mostly a combination of both, indeed.
Yeah. No, clear. And yeah, I think it's also interesting to to deep dive a bit into what are actually the hidden costs of poor test data management. Stefan, maybe you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I already referenced this, but in average, it actually takes 2 months for people to get access to data sets internally which contain PII information. So again, personal identifiable information. Which makes sense because of all the compliancy rules, right? You have HIPAA, you have GDPR, AVG, a large amount of different regulations, which I completely agree with. But the internal processes are quite complex. So it takes an average 2 months to get access to that data. And then if you take into account that 30% of the data which is actually delivered is not valid for your specific use case, you have to go through that process again. So in average, across the globe, it takes 3 months to get access to relevant test data sets, which you can then finally use. Like I also said, so this results in the fact that companies and developers and testers are creating their own test data sets, and they are starting to do tests with it, but it's actually not really good test data. And this results, poor test data testing results actually into 73% of all compliance breaches from last year in finance were due to poor test data management. In total, within the financial services industry, people are spending 3.3 billion just on making sure that the infrastructure for test data management is set up. But if it's done correctly, they can actually save 50% of that cost, even more. So it's quite a big impact from that sense. Then separate from that, if you are in production and you released all these new functions and features and you get a breach, in average in the financial services industry, one breach is costing $6 million. And breaches happen a lot, thousands of times a year across the industry. But also, you know, if you had really good quality test data, you could have spotted 95% of your bugs which ended up into production because of the good quality test data. If you spot a bug in production, the costs are 100 times higher to actually recover from that than if you would have spotted it in your standard DTAP environment, right? Because it has way less impact. Then separate from that, I also reference it high-levelly, but a large amount of people, they think, well, okay, we are quite well protected. We have all the PII sensitive information, we have it masked. But multiple research studies actually show that most of the data sets can be potentially backwards traceable. And a really nice example here is, for example, credit card transactional information, but it applies to any transactional information. It also applies to insurance companies where you submit your claims. If you use that data, 90% of that is actually backwards traceable, because in the end, you have all those specific use cases, specific cases for each individual person, where they can actually pinpoint to that relevant person. Let's say that one Wim is doing every day a transaction of 1 million euros to the same bank account number. I'm guessing that in a month time, I'm guessing that there's only one person, and that would be Wim in that case. Another underestimated part is that most companies actually do manual testing. Manual testing is quite intensive labor-wise, and you can automate a large amount of these processes. And by automating these processes for all your individual test use cases, you can actually save up a lot of money. So it depends on each individual study which you read about it, but in this case, it's a study from Capital, and it says 40%, but I also saw studies around 30%. I saw studies around 50%. So it's also quite diverse on who you would ask in that sense. And of course, in the most horrible downtimes, horrible cases, if you have a bug in production and it actually results into downtime, those costs are quite extreme. This is the cost per minute, but it's not even speaking about the customer experience which you're serving to your end clients, who are actually potentially not going to be your client anymore in the future. And that impact is also quite important because the competition is fierce, right? So these are just some points. We have like hundreds of individual points which we can reference about the hidden costs of test data management, which we actually also combined into a use cases deck, where we added some of these points in there, which you can request after the meeting if you are interested as well.
Handing over the word to Marijn for the demo. And I think before we go into the demo, a quick intro into how the deployment and connections work.
Yeah, surely. And I see in the meanwhile, oh, I now just got access for sharing my screen as well. But indeed, like I'm going to demo our application, the UI variant, because yeah, we have a UI variant, but we also have a REST API variant, which are essentially the same product, but via the REST API, you can automate the things that you can do via the UI. But yeah, it all runs in the secure infrastructure of your secure infrastructure. So yeah, we provide the software via Docker images, and there you can deploy it yeah, fully on premise. Essentially, you can deploy it anywhere, but yeah, we typically see it mostly often be running in the secure infrastructure of the customer. So that's yeah, that's essentially how we deploy. How it then works is you connect to your yeah, your source database using one of our connectors, and the source database typically contains your production data. It can also be a copy thereof, and then yeah, then you connect also to a destination database. So that's where you're going to write the synthetic data or the mask data to that you have generated. Yeah, so these are the main 3 steps there. Let me share my screen how that looks actually in practice. There we go. So yeah, so this is really the panel where it all starts. So as the name already suggests, it's the Launch Your Workspace panel. So here you can launch your workspace to generate your data. And typically you start by connecting to your database, as I just mentioned. Let's assume we have already done that. In fact, we have already done that, and we have created a workspace before. So I can open that. So I have a bunch of different workspaces, but I'm going to take this this workspace containing some financial information, bank data. So let me actually open that. I'm now forwarded to this job configuration panel. So yeah, here it all starts. Here I can configure everything around my data generation job. And yeah, and so an interesting fact I read was that like, well, you can reduce times to test data cycle times by 70% when using AI-driven methods to generate to also create your test data. So yeah, that's something I actually want to highlight directly by highlighting as a key feature here. As you see here, a number of tables are highlighted here with the PII symbol. So if I select this particular table, then I see there, oh, all these columns are also labeled as PII. But that's something I did not do manually, but this actually came as a result of our well, AI-driven PII scanner. So I can actually switch to the PII tab right here to get an overview of all those columns which were identified as PII by the PII scanner. So this PII scanner is not only looking at well, data types, column names, but it's also actually looking at the data. So it's really using some more advanced well, named entity recognition models for the technical audience. Yeah, and what we see here is actually, we see for this particular client table, all the columns that have been labeled as PII. And actually our models suggested how to protect those particular columns. So for example, we have the address column here, and our PII scanner suggested to replace it with an address mocker. And the mocker is one of the types of generators that we provide in the platform. So here I can preview, for example, what are the kind of values are under there. I can generate it for a bunch of different locales, because depending on my data, I may want to make it more representative for the specific locale, what the data is representing. I can even then mention, okay, let's simulate some missing values, because it can well be that you in your real data you are also missing values. It's never perfect, right? And that's exactly what you want to account for also in your test data, these imperfections which can potentially lead your software to break or lead to undesired situations. So yeah, we can do that like this. I can confirm if I do that. What you see, that particular column is not listed here anymore under the unprotected PII columns tab, but it moved actually to the protected PII columns tab. So as you can see, this leads to a very structured way to protecting your database. And well, let's assume, here we already have quite a bunch of tables, but we have seen quite some production databases with even many more tables, with even hundreds in some occasions. And yeah, if you are going to want to protect all the sensitive data there manually, so like searching what is sensitive, then deciding how to protect it, well, you can imagine that will take a very long time, and then you will not even be sure if you actually covered everything. So that's so this really gives a very structured approach to do that, and a fast approach as well. So yeah, so just to give an example again, like what could happen if you were to do this manually, besides all the time that it takes. Let's, for example, take this social security number column. I can actually switch back to this screen to see what does the data actually look like under there. So it looks like this. Yeah, so it has a very specific format. And there are actually there's some logic underneath which also checks some validations to determine whether this social security number is actually a valid one. Well, and typically that should also be tested in your test case. At least that's something we have heard from multiple customers, that they are also that needs to be accounted for as well. So you can apply here a mocker as well. And I can apply the social security number mocker. Can just apply it as such. And here it actually already takes into account all that logic underneath to ensure that they are, well, as good as real social security numbers. They are not real, so you can safely use them for testing, but they well, ensure that you can use it properly for testing potential problems. So yeah, so that's what we are doing here. So yeah, I can do it from this screen or from this screen where I was just making the changes. But yeah, so the goal is really to get all unprotected PII columns to the protected side, and then I've successfully protected my database. And I just showed some examples of mockers. But well, we have a bunch of different generators. Because each of those different methods can facilitate different cases. So yeah, one of the key points in the agenda was also traditional methods are not enough, but they are still very useful. So we have those inside the platform. But next to that, we have all essentially the available methods out there, the modern methods today as well, to ensure that your data is covered, that your test data is as production-like as possible for any thinkable scenario. So let me give an example for a case where, for example, we don't just want to protect the column, but we want to protect it in a way that it's consistent over different tables and maybe even over different systems, so over databases. How can I achieve that? So for that, we have the example of we have a consistent mapping. So as an example, what I can do, I can apply, for example, on this email column, where I have a bunch of email addresses. And let's say I find this particular value, michaelmartinez@gmail.com. But this value also exists in another system, so in another database that I'm working with. When I'm protecting this value, I still want to be able to link the protected value to the other systems, because otherwise I cannot do, for instance, integration testing over different systems. And to do that, I can apply, again, a mocker. So we have quite a number of different email mockers, depending on what's best for you. I can apply it like this. I can preview it like this. But rather than just generating it like this, I'm actually enabling consistent mapping here. So what will happen in this case is that, anywhere where I apply this setting and I see this value, Michael Martinez, it will be replaced by this new fake value. That way I can still preserve consistency across different systems. And that's what we see is typically a very important one. So that's one type of generator. I think the value is in that we provide a lot of different types of generators. So for example, when we go to more the modern, the AI-driven generators, those are typically useful for example, transaction data. Because here we are really focusing on PII, so it stands for personally identifiable information. So essentially, columns containing values that can be used to directly identify individuals. But actually, non-PII columns can still be indirect identifiers of, and that can in particular be applied for transactional data. So if you have many transactions for a certain customer for a certain account, and those transactions can easily get to a unique pattern that can lead to one specific individual. So if you want to protect this kind of data, which is a bit more complex, you want to use modern approaches such as AI-generated synthetic data. So to give as an example, I can here for the amount column, I can apply so-called generator AI-powered generation. And I can do that for a bunch of different columns. So for the amount column, the balance column, for example, and I can include more columns as I wish. But what will happen then is that our AI will train a model on the combination of these columns and will then generate entirely new data that still preserves the deep statistical patterns that will exist in these columns. And here we only have 2 columns, but we can go endless, as many columns as we wish. You will then generate entirely new rows, but the statistical value is still preserved. And that's and typically we see really in financial sector for transaction data that can be a real challenge to get that properly protected. AI generated synthetic data can really help there. Beyond those cases, there can also, of course, be cases where you may not have any data yet, or very specific edge cases, as I was considering, which are based on very specific rules, maybe that specifically apply to your business. That can also be the case. If you want to cover those, we have another kind of generation method, well, it's called rule-based synthetic data. And it's rule-based synthetic data, which we support via what we call calculated columns. Yeah, just as an example, I may have here an email column, and potentially I want to fill this email column based on the first name and last name columns, for example. So that's actually a relatively simple example, but just to illustrate the logic that you may want to model, because yeah, how to model this, we can apply it for any kind of situation. So let me go to a calculated column. What I can do now, I can say, for example, do a concatenate of the first name column. Let me see if I'm getting it right. So the first name column and the last name column. Yeah, already to concatenate the values. Well, I can maybe do a space or an at, or something like an underscore in between. And then in the end, do like an email mocker, for example. Let me see if I'm using the right syntax here. Email. Let's see. Yeah, okay. I think I should actually use a different one, but just to get. We have so many mockers that I'm even getting lost in. Well, you get the point. So we also have like the domain domain part. I couldn't find that mocker at this point, but this way you can kind of well, combine all kinds of columns and derive logic based on other columns very specifically for your scenario. So that's yeah, that's really well, if you want to generate data from scratch or cover these very specific edge cases, as I was referring to. So that's yeah, to give some illustration there on the variety of different generation methods that we have in the platform. And yeah, so I think important to mention again, we have all these generators, and yeah, you can apply them as such via the UI. But you may very likely want to automate this because another interesting fact, by automating, you can reduce testing costs by up to 20%. Yeah, that's typically how we see our platform being used by customers as well. They typically first define how they want to protect their data using the UI typically. And if they then see like, hey, we kind of know now based on our data how we want to do it, we just now want to automate it. So we want to schedule it for example, every week or maybe even every night, for example. We can do that using the REST API. So that's yeah, that's typically how it works. And we have a lot of different features which I didn't cover today, but I think this is a sneak preview in some of the key value points for today.
Thanks.
Right.
Thanks for sharing this this demo, and I think this gave a great overview about the platform, the functionalities, and also the value that we can deliver with the platform in test data management use cases in the financial sector. I think I received some questions referring back to the beginning about being able to create test data in a fast way. What do you think is the difference in terms of key functionalities that we support to accelerate test data generation in comparison to those organizations that really struggle with doing it manually and spending a lot of time in getting the test data right?
Yeah, good, yeah, interesting, good question. So it already starts what I just demonstrated in the platform, right? It's about discovery of the sensitive data, and that can already be very time consuming, and especially if you're working with very large databases, multiple databases. So we see that there can be hundreds of tables, each table containing 100+ columns. Well, good luck finding all the sensitive parts in there. So yeah, for that we have specifically developed like the AI-driven PII scanner, which uses really more advanced models to really look at the actual data there and to really infer, is this sensitive, is it not? If so, what kind of sensitive data is there? And then also we come up with suggestions on how to replace actually that data. So that's the next step. After the discovery, also you have directly an available generator to protect it the right way. And that can save a lot of time. And next to that, I think the different combination of generators that we provide. So I just showed a couple of them. Also allow you to cover each possible scenario the most efficient way as well. So that can save a large amount of time. Yeah.
Add as well. So I see a lot of clients struggling with their incumbent solutions as well, which are typically working with scripting methods. So every time they need to change something, a whole new battery of the developers from their incumbent test data management solution have to come over, and it takes a couple of weeks to actually do something there as well. And these types of struggles, you don't really see with a platform like Synta.
Yeah, that's clear. And I think another question that we received was, what is the most used functionality for test data management use cases by our customers? Do you have anything to share on that?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I can say you have to generate data, of course, and you have to connect to your database. So, we have a lot of different connectors. So connectors are always used to connect, and in sequence to generate the data, use the generators. But we see, like, in terms of the types of generators that are being used, that really varies a lot, because the AI power generation, for example, that I mentioned, typically is very relevant for if you want to perform more like analytics use case, or any kind of use case where statistical value plays an important role. And in test data cases, it's sometimes also relevant in statistical value, but often there are just very specific situations, like, for example, the social security number formatting I was just showing. That can be typically for test data cases, and also consistency across systems. So, but yeah, those are two feature points that are used a lot for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's also a nice bridge to the other question that was related to what type of tests and use cases is the platform being used for. Maybe you can share a bit about that, Stefan. I think that might also be an introduction to our deck related to the most frequently seen test data use cases. I can potentially share something on the slide related to that.
Yeah, so we actually created a deck from the top test data management use cases, which we see a lot with our clients, where we actually explain what the test data management use case is, but also what the impact is of the status quo in the market at the moment. And separate from that, how we actually can solve these problems. So you have, of course, the standard DTAP environment use cases, security testing, regression, API testing, performance and load testing. Well, all these standard things companies go through every day. But you also have demo data. Let's say you have a known solution which you need to provide data to as well. It has to be as production-like as possible, so you can actually demo it correctly. You want to train AI and machine learning models, so you have to have test data for that as well. So there are an endless amount of specific tests companies do. And from our perspective, we created the top 20 use cases for test data management, for AI-generated synthetic data, but also for masking, so the identification. To make sure that we have an easy start for our clients. So I noticed a large amount of companies, they do realize they need to do something to become more compliant, and to make sure that they are actually becoming fully compliant, but also drive further innovation speed. And they struggle with the starting point. And I think these use cases decks will definitely be valuable for everyone.
Yeah, and I can imagine that some of the audience is interested in this deck. How can they get access to this document?
I'll never give access. No, so just reach out, send me an email, send me a LinkedIn request, or reach out through the Sinto email. We can also maybe add it tomorrow, the test data management use case deck to the email we're sending out to all the registrants for this webinar. That would be good. And then for all the other ones, AI generated masking, just reach out to us and I'm happy to provide it.
Thanks a lot. And yeah, indeed, if you want to reach out, it might be practical to have the contact details. I'm just sharing the screen with my contact details and Stefan's contact details. Always feel free to reach out to us, to contact us, or to book a demo. As mentioned, after this webinar, we will share with all of you an email with the slides, with the recordings, and via that way you always also have our contact details available. You can easily reply with any questions you might have, or questions that might not have been covered during the webinar. We are there for you. For now, I want to thank, first of all, everyone for joining, participating during this webinar. And yeah, we are looking forward to speak to all of you soon in the future. And we would like to wish you all a nice rest of the day or a nice rest of the evening. And yeah, hope to speak soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.